for the drainage easement on their side. The landscape that you see adjacent to the RV storage, that would be something that we are asking the applicant to maintain.
Okay. I noticed that there's a lease that the city's entering into for 10 foot on the western side with the applicant. Is that the case, and could you address that?
Commissioner Grace, can you further kind of explain the question for me?
Yes. If there's a lease from the city for the western 10-foot that's going to be used for a landscape buffer, could not the applicant maybe take care of some more of the right-of-way?
Understood. Thank you for the clarification. Commissioner Grice, members of the commission, those details of the lease agreement are still being worked out. What we have asked, since the landscaping portion is tied to this particular application, staff is seeking that the applicant maintain that landscaping within the city's right-of-way. That is currently what we are asking of them.
Okay. Then I want to ask about the dump station. You know, it's hopefully not just the same as one commercial use, because it's a number of users. So is there some kind of stepped payments or fees for the dump station? I mean, because I noticed that there's some kind of log that a user is going to be using, or indicating how much effluence being put into the system. So is there like some type of compensation to the city for that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Grice, in terms of those particulars, characteristics of that nature to some degree are best answered by the applicant. In terms of the fees associated with the dumping station, that one we would need to
imposed on the applicant regarding idling of these vehicles? Could they?
Welcome everyone to our first ever virtual Caregiver Connect. We are so excited to be here today to bring you so much latest research and resources for your loved ones. You know, at Benevilla, we are always here to help. We actually had our last Caregiver Connect back in March before the whole pandemic hit, and we had about 200 people. It was amazing. So I really want to thank the city of Peoria to be able to host us today to bring our Caregiver Connect to you. Without them, we would not have been able to provide this event today. And our hearts really go out to all those affected by this terrible virus. We know our lives have been turned upside down, and if you need someone to reach out to Benevilla. We're here to help you for sure. We want to thank Western State Bank. They're one of our sponsors for this event, and they are a wonderful bank. We're so appreciative of all of our sponsors and everybody that can help Benevilla and help everything that we do in the community. And then we have a wonderful group of sustaining partners. So those partners really align with our mission and our values here at Benevilla. So whether Benevilla provides a service or whether you need another service, we have resources for you. So I want to talk a little bit about Benevilla before we get started, because some of you may have never heard of Benevilla before. We actually have 5 life enrichment programs that are open during the day to give caregivers respite. And in these life enrichment programs, we serve people with dementia, stroke survivors, people with Parkinson's, and we have one program for people with individual intellectual and cognitive disabilities. In these programs, we do yoga and Tai Chi and creative aging. And during the pandemic, yes, we did close down for a little while, but I'm happy to report that we are back open again. Caregivers were just crying as they were dropping off their loved ones because they were so excited just to get that respite and that time just to relax. And their loved ones were just so happy to see others and connect with others again. So at Benevilla, we also have free home services for our seniors in the West Valley of Phoenix. So if you're a senior who can't drive anymore, call Benevilla, because we can take you to doctor's appointments, we can go grocery shopping for you. We have a huge friendly visitor program also. So if you're isolated and have no one to talk to, we have wonderful, wonderful volunteers that will just reach out by phone right now due to COVID, but usually in-person friendly visiting too. So if you need any resources, or after this event, if you want to watch this event again or share it with your friends or family or your neighbors who you may think need these resources, call 623-584-4999, and we will get you connected to a video clip of this event today. So I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce Dr. Goldfarb. She's a double board-certified neurologist and psychiatrist at the Banner Sun Health Research Institute in Sun City. She received her medical degree from the University of Arizona College of Medicine, Phoenix, and completed residency and a neurodegenerative disease research fellowship at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. We were just talking about Rhode Island a little bit ago and how our weather is so much nicer here than Rhode Island. At Banner Sun Health Research Institute, Dr. Goldfarb cares for patients and families at the Cleo Roberts Memory Center and is involved in many Alzheimer's clinical trials. She's also the medical director for the Banner Dementia Care Partners Program, enhancing dementia care for our West Valley Banner primary care clinics. So I'm going to turn it off to Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here at the Benevilla Caregiver Connect event. So today I'll be talking about a topic that has taken on significantly more relevance now during COVID, which is how routines are important for healthy brain aging. So let's start with a case. So John is an 81-year-old patient of mine who comes in for a follow-up visit with his wife, Barbara. They've noticed over the last few months he's had a little more trouble coming up with the words he wants to say. He's repeating questions a little more. And he says he's kind of lost interest in doing things he used to enjoy. Now his wife notices that he's been a little more irritable and a little more depressed. And he hasn't had any new medical conditions or medications since the last several months. So one of the first questions I ask people when I'm getting to know them when they're new to me is, what is your typical day like lately? What time do you wake up? How do you spend your days? And what time do you go to bed? The responses to those questions provide a wealth of information that absolutely guides the visit, guides my impressions and plan and recommendations. Now, other things that this tells me is that, do they have any structure and routine to their day? What is their sleep schedule like? Is it optimal for them? And if they do have activities in their days and weeks, what kind are they? And how often are they? Are they physical activities, social activities, spiritual activities, cognitive activities? And are these activities meaningful to the person? Now you can imagine that since COVID has hit, I have to ask this question twice. So I have to say, what is your typical day like now? And what was it like before COVID? And for all of us, our routines at the very least have been mildly disrupted, if not totally obliterated. And this loss of structure in our society has put us, and especially our older adults, at risk for decline in cognition and function. And so we're seeing lots of negative effects from this, including sleep disruption, mental health issues, and increased substance abuse. Now, John, my patient, answers my questions and tells me, well, he wakes up sometime between 8 to 10 a.m. He takes the dog out, has breakfast, cleans up the house a little, has lunch, then watches TV, dozes off while he's watching TV, has dinner, and then watches TV again, mainly the news, before he goes to bed around midnight. Now, before COVID, he was waking up at 7 a.m. In the mornings, he would go for walks with his wife for about 1.5 miles a day. And in the afternoons, he was going to the gym about 3 times a week. He was going to bed at 11 p.m. instead of midnight. And also his daughter and grandkids were visiting a couple times a week. They were both attending programs at Benevilla, and they were attending the early stage memory loss support group at Banner Sun Health Research Institute. So today, I will be talking again about what is the importance of routine for healthy brain aging, and talking about changes in sleep and circadian rhythms with aging, and how to identify personalized strategies to strengthen and maintain healthy routines. So firstly, let's talk about circadian rhythms. This is really the foundation of all of our routines. And so what are circadian rhythms? So circadian is a Latin phrase that means from circa diem, that means around a day. So these are 24-hour cycles. They're our body's internal clock. It's running in the background, and it's helping all of our essential processes and functions go along. Now, the most well-known circadian rhythm that we talk about all the time is sleep, so the sleep-wake cycle. But there are actually many circadian rhythms that are all interconnected, such as the endocrine system, the immune system, metabolism, and so all these things work together. So what controls circadian rhythms? There's something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So we're just going to call it the master clock today. It's deep in our brains in the hypothalamus. And that is essentially the conductor of this orchestra that sets the rhythm for the body. Now, this is important because each organ has its own circadian rhythm. Most cells in our body have their own clock, so we need this master clock to keep everything on schedule. Now, what tells our master clock what time it is? So the primary thing that tells our brain what time it is light. So light coming into the eyes, traveling to the back of the brain to the master clock. And the light says, oh, it's daytime. So we make sure there's so the brain stops melatonin production, which is the sleep hormone, or keeps melatonin from being produced. And it also sets into effect all of these other circadian rhythms and body systems that I mentioned, setting your body up to function optimally during the day. Now, there are other external cues besides light that are also important and essential, and these really are our routines. So these are meals, physical activity, social activity. And so when these are done on a routine basis, our bodies can prepare for these things to happen, and they can do them well during and then after. So for example, meals. So if we sort of have a regular 3 meals a day schedule, our bodies know when that's coming, and we all sort of know what that feels like to be hungry at typical times during the day. And then after we eat, our bodies digest. So again, when we do this all in a rhythm and routine, it sets us up for success. And there's a synergy between all of these external cues and the internal clock. So what happens when our circadian rhythms are disrupted? So in other words, the way I put it, when your routine is disrupted. So if it's just briefly or transiently, then your body should be able to reset. For example, when we say fly across the country or fly across the ocean, most of us have had the experience of jet lag, okay? And that's because our bodies are expecting to see light and dark at a certain time, and that doesn't happen. But we all know that over a few days, our bodies adapt to this because we're also engaging in these other things that I mentioned, like meals and physical activity and social activity. So what about with aging? What can affect circadian rhythms just with aging? So the structures in the brain responsible for the master clock and getting the light from the eyes to the brain can become atrophied or shrink over time. And so that can make that connection a little more difficult. And then also, as we age, we can have decreased sensitivity to these external cues. And an example of what can cause that is eye diseases, such as cataracts. So if there's actually a barrier to the light getting into the eye and getting into the brain, that can hurt the flow of this, this cue. Now with dementia, this is even magnified. And so the brain is much more sensitive to the loss of these cues. And that can lead us into quicker sleep disruption and other disruption in our circadian rhythms. Now, what kinds of external factors can hurt our circadian rhythms and sleep with aging? So many of you could answer this, could, I'm sure, quickly list all sorts of things. But I want to start with what's a big thing that can disrupt sleep with aging? And that is retirement. So most of us spend our work life being excited to retire, but then maybe we don't all have a plan for when suddenly there's not much structure and routine. And maybe our alarm clock gets permanently retired also. So what can happen? Well, a person may linger longer in bed in the morning. They may take naps during the day. They may stay up later and be, say, watching TV and go to sleep later than typically. Now, this has negative effects also, of course, when we're not sleeping well or not having our optimal sleep schedule on the daytime, the other circadian rhythm. So also important is having having an optimal sleep window. So something that can disrupt our sleep and circadian rhythms is when, for our individual needs, we are not sleeping at the chunk of hours during the night that is ideal and optimal for us. So everyone is unique in where their best sleep window is. And some people, when they retire, for example, their sleep improves because perhaps they're in a job where they had to wake up extremely early, and maybe they're a night owl. So they had to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning to get to work, say a teacher. But really, for their personal system, they maybe should be able to sleep till 7 a.m., for example. And so they feel better upon retirement. Now, other things that can hurt circadian rhythms and sleep are if the environmental cues are disrupted, like I mentioned, light, meals, physical activity, social activity. Of course, medical conditions can affect sleep, such as obstructive sleep apnea, restless legs, REM sleep behavior disorder. There are medications that can disrupt the sleep schedule, make us sleepier during the day, so we feel compelled to nap, which hurts the nighttime sleep. And some of these things we can't change. If we have certain medical conditions, we have them. So it's important to find ways to adapt. Of course, stress and anxiety can affect sleep. And for those of us who are prone to worrying, it's I'm sure you know it well that trying to lay down to sleep, maybe start thinking about things that you're worried about, or maybe you wake up in the middle of the night and just are worrying about things. And this has certainly become much more significant in the setting of COVID, namely severe anxiety. And there's a term that's been coined recently that you may have heard of called coronaphobia. And this is when the anxiety is to an excessive degree that the fears of catching COVID and dying become out of proportion to the situation. So to step back, it's normal to have anxiety and stress right now because of many reasons and the profound uncertainty that we're living with. But this is when it's gone to an extent that the person can no longer function, doesn't want to leave the house, avoids situations that maybe don't even have an increased risk. So this is a huge issue. Also affecting sleep, depression. Certain types of depression can cause us to wake up really early, say at 3 in the morning, earlier than we should be waking up, even though we're still tired and need the sleep. Some other kinds of depression can make us sleep longer and sleep more and just be tired and fatigued all the time. I'm telling you all of these things so that you're all thinking in your own life, are any of these affecting you? Because later on we'll talk about how can we maybe make small shifts in some of these things. Alcohol can disrupt our sleep and circadian rhythms. And alcohol is an interesting one because it's sedating, it's a sedative, it makes you fall asleep quickly, and that's a fact. However, the sleep that you get is lower quality sleep. It's not good sleep. And so what happens is when the alcohol wears off, when the alcohol levels in your blood drop, you wake up. And also the sleep you're getting, if you've had a lot of alcohol, is you're not getting a lot of the non-REM slow wave sleep, which is the restorative, the refreshing sleep, the deepest sleep, and that's really what we need for our brains. And that non-REM slow wave sleep has been shown to potentially be the time when the toxic proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease, amyloid and tau, for example, are cleared from the brain. So that's a newer concept, but it does make sense. Stimulants such as caffeine, coffee, tea, nicotine, those things also can disrupt sleep. And sometimes people don't realize how much they're drinking because they've been doing it for so long. And if someone's coming in to see me in clinic and says they have sleep issues, I always ask about this. This is really important. If they say, you know, I'm drinking 16 cups of coffee a day, well, that's what we're going to focus on first to cut that down. And that's going to be a slow process because we don't want to do that abruptly. That'll be difficult. But as well, we don't want to drink caffeine after about 2 p.m. or so, maybe about at least 8 hours before you plan to go to sleep. Technology can disrupt sleep and circadian rhythms. And with that, I'll just mention 2 things, which is using any kind of screens while you're laying in bed before you're trying to go to sleep. That can keep your brain awake for a number of reasons. There can be certain types of blue light that's coming from the screen that can keep that master clock thinking that, oh, it's still daytime. Now, there are a lot of filters now that keep that kind of blue light wave out of screens, which is good. But also, if you're doing things on your phones or your tablets while you're in bed, you're associating your bed with this kind of activity, whereas you should just be associating your bed with sleep. And finally, I wanted to mention something very relevant to today is news consumption. So this can affect your sleep. And this is when, you know, doctor, should I not know what's going on in the world? Of course you should know what's going on in the world. But I would ask you, how much news do you need? How many hours do you need to know what's going on in the world? Is there a point at which it gets redundant and it's not productive? And I can say that, and I think we'd all agree that there's a lot of negativity in the news now, no matter what your political views are. If it bleeds, it leads. And so I would say, think about that as keeping, you know, that in moderation. So how do you get back on track and reset your rhythms if you're having some difficulty in these areas? Or even if you're not, if you just want to make sure you continue to have good sleep. Though I would say, though, again, we've all had disrupted routines now. And so this is a good thing to focus on to really protect the nighttime sleep. And so how do we do that? So I talked about identifying your personal sleep window. I would encourage you to really take the time to think about what is that for you. Now, sleep is an exciting topic, and people often have a lot of questions about what's best for them. And I want to say, I want to put that back on you, because sleep is so important that you should take the time to sit down and think about what set of hours when you sleep do you tend to feel best during the day and have the most energy? It used to be that it was said, a lot of people said, well, you need to sleep everyone needs 8 hours of sleep a day. So that turns out that's not true. And in the last decade, there's been an explosion of sleep research. So it seems like it's somewhere between 6 and 9 hours a day. It depends on the person, but probably if you get at least 6 hours, that's good for some people. And then, going to bed, is it 10 to 5? Is it 11 to 6? Is it, 8 to 4? So it's really up to you, and it's so much better to figure that out if you're having sleep trouble than to just reach for a sleep medication, because that is ultimately going to be counterproductive, and it's not good in the long run to use those. Now the next point is stick with a fixed wake-up time. So find the time that works best for you and set an alarm clock if you have to. And you may have to pull that alarm clock out of retirement. But I assure you that if you find the right time for you, say 6:30 a.m., you're going to feel better during the day. So make that an important part of your schedule, because that's going to set you up for success for the rest of the day. Then your body's going to know, okay, it's time to start the day. Let's get all these circadian rhythms going. Let's get things ready. The next point about improving your sleep is limit daytime napping. So this can be a controversial topic, and I often hear, but I'm 85 years old. Haven't I earned the right to nap? Yes, absolutely. So what's the best kind of napping? It's a power nap. It's really going to be 30 minutes or less. Sometimes, when with the folks I work with in clinic, I say up to 45 minutes is okay. And really just one nap a day. Now, if you're moving into more severe, moderate to severe dementia, maybe 2 power naps a day is what is needed. When you start napping more than that amount of time, what you're doing is you're decreasing your need to sleep when it comes for the nighttime sleep time. When it's your bedtime, you might notice, I'm having trouble falling asleep at night. It's because you're not tired enough, because you maybe napped too much during the day. And so how do we fill our time if we have these naps, if we have nothing to do because of COVID taking away all our routines? Well, I'm going to talk about that shortly. How can we adapt and find things to bring, meaningful things to bring into our days? And finally, maybe the most important thing is to listen to and trust your body and your circadian rhythms. Your body will reset itself. If you have a bad night's sleep and you are sleep deprived and you're exhausted, you will have a high quality sleep that next night if you let your body do it and not stress and worry about it. And I know that's hard to do sometimes, but sleep is essentially like an autonomic dysfunction, like digestion. You're going to do it even if you're not thinking about it, okay? And amazingly, what happens is our bodies are very smart. So if we have that bad night of sleep and we're really tired the next day, the subsequent night of sleep is going to be full of the higher quality, slow wave restorative sleep. So you're going to get more of that restorative sleep in that next night because you're so tired versus a typical night's sleep. So we just have to trust our bodies and let that happen. So I like this quote from C.S. Lewis, the author. Many things such as loving, going to sleep, and behaving unaffectedly are done worst when we try hardest to do them. So let's go back to John, our patient. So, he's had a little bit of cognitive decline, mood changes, a little bit irritable lately, a little bit depressed. Not as excited to do things that he used to enjoy. So when I'm going through my questions and trying to figure out how, what's the next steps in this situation? Could this be progression of his Alzheimer's disease? Well, first I see that he's had a change in his routine, and he's not doing a lot of the things that he used to do. He's not waking up at 7 a.m. strictly. He's getting up at variable times in the morning. He's going to sleep later. He's napping during the day, whereas he used to go do some exercise. He used to spend time with his family and go to these different groups at Benevilla and Banner Sun Health Research Institute, and all of those things are gone away. And so my first step is going to be, let's target these things before we start talking about thinking, assuming this is just progression of Alzheimer's disease. Now, again, going back to John is an engineer. So I'm going to guess that he likes to get into the details and plan things. So, and have structure, frankly. And so I'm going to bring that up again with him and get him involved and his wife, Barbara, to figure out how are we going to get more routine and structure to your days. So my recommendations would be to go back to that 7 a.m. wake up time and stick with that. You're going to resume walking with your wife in the mornings as much as possible when weather permits. And if gyms aren't open, which most of them are now, but who knows, they may close again, it's important to have a plan. So how are you going to get that physical activity if you can't get it at the gym or outside? Because we are in Phoenix area, so we do know that almost half the year it's really hot out during the day. And so probably it may not be feasible to walk or do exercise outside for much of the year. And so it's important anyway for us here to have a plan of how can we do some exercise indoors. And there are lots of programs accessible online and free that to help with exercise in the home, and something for everybody. Of course, you need to do it safely, but I would encourage John to look into that as well. I'd encourage them to get back into the Banner Sun Health early stage memory loss support group. We do have everything virtual now. So all of our programs and groups are accessible now online. And although you may say, well, it's not as good like that, I'd rather, it's important to be with the people in the group or the different activities. Okay, absolutely, it's different, and it may not be, and it won't be like it is when it's in person. But there is still significant value, and it may actually be better than you even realize. So I would encourage you to get back into those programs, as well as, and Benevilla, of course. And I have, as a side note, personally heard from many of my patients the challenges of when the Benevilla groups and events weren't accessible. So very happy that more and more is available. Otherwise, I'd suggest to John to decrease his nap time during the day to 45 minutes or less, as I said, and then try connecting more with his daughter and grandkids. So again, while you may never have, prior to 2020, you may never have intended to or wanted to use video calls like Skype and FaceTime and Zoom, but this is where we're at now, and these are the options we have. And again, because our older adults are more at risk of complications of COVID, it's really important to get on board with these so you can continue to be connected. And there are significant benefits from that type of interaction, particularly compared to no interaction socially. And also, I would just add as a side note, these technologies, this is a new language for many of us. And so this is actually building your brain. This is building new neural networks that you're learning how to use these technologies. So although that may not be the primary motivating factor for you to use them, I would keep that in mind. And then finally, we talked about decreasing news consumption. If you are somebody that does find that you kind of tend to spend a lot of time on the news and also engaging in different social media platforms all throughout the day, consider what's the best for you and your well-being and your psyche, especially before bed. And I want to mention that for those who are care partners of people with dementia, the news before bed can inadvertently be brought into the nighttime and the sleeping, and there can be some confusion waking up and bringing that, those traumatic things that are being seen and heard on the news into the daytime. So, and that can, of course, affect a person's mental health and lead to some paranoia and things like that. So that's another reason to cut down on that news consumption, especially before bed. So in terms of how do you create your new COVID routine. So the most important thing is to set realistic expectations. And as I mentioned, nothing's going to be like it was before. So it's important to be open-minded, but know that the benefit of doing this far outweighs the difficulties and the challenges and the bumps in the road that go along with it. Because again, we are seeing cognitive and functional decline right now, especially in our older adults. And these are the primary reasons that is happening. Next, you want to start small. So you want to have very small or tiny goals that you're trying to achieve. I like this. There's a book by Dr. B.J. Fogg. It's called Tiny Habits, and he's at Stanford. And he talks about there are 3 things that are needed to make behavior change. So just having motivation is not enough. So motivation is finicky, and as we all know, we may have every good intent, but if the motivation just might not be there. There has to be ability, so it needs to be easy. So when I say small, it has to be very doable where it doesn't feel distressful or painful just thinking about engaging in that change. And then there needs to be a prompt or a cue. So knowledge, ability, cue. So those are the 3 things needed to make some kind of shift or behavior change in your current routine. And so an example of this is, say you want to start meditating or resume meditating. Perhaps when you turn on your coffee pot in the morning, you meditate for 1 minute or even 30 seconds, a very small amount. That almost sounds ridiculous maybe, but if you can do it, it probably sounds doable, right? So if you can do that for 1 minute every single day, that's going to be very meaningful and also show you that you can take control of your life. And then you build on that. Then you have another goal that you engage in, but also, again, something small. Now, if you get off track, it's important to know that we're in completely unprecedented times, and just don't beat yourself up and try again. And again, come up with another small goal. Now, when you're a caregiver, you have to take inventory of your own routine, how it is right now, your care partner, your person living with dementia, what is their routine and how has that changed? And then as a unit. So you're used to doing this, but this does take more work and time. But I would also encourage you to find those things that you can do together. Luckily, there are some things like Benevilla programs that are more accessible now. But again, knowing that this may change, we don't know. So just one step at a time. Now, interestingly, there's been some recent research looking at how having rituals in your life can decrease your sensitivity to performance failure. So this is an interesting study that was done where they hooked up EEG monitors to people's brains to check their brain waves for something called a special electrical wave that's called error response negativity. And so this is when someone failed at a task would show this blip. And so people that engaged in certain rituals routinely before that task, even if they failed at it, they were not as sensitive to failure. So this is just an interesting side note that especially in this environment that we're in, perhaps having some rituals in our days can help decrease our anxiety. And if things don't go right or as planned, we can move through them more easily and not get bogged down. So I just wanted to mention, finally, some of the programs that are available at Banner Sun Health Research Institute. We're a full-service organization, and we are associated also with Banner Alzheimer's disease, which is downtown. So I would encourage you to go to banneralz.org, that's banneralz.org, and sign up for the Beacon newsletter, which will give you lots of information on different topics and also let you know about all of the events and programs we have going on. Please follow us on Facebook. We have a brain health check-in. If you're worried about you're having some memory trouble, you can get in touch with us. And we also have a variety of different kinds of research studies for people who we say are cognitively unimpaired, all the way to mild cognitive impairment, mild, moderate, severe dementia. There are different things. There are clinical trials of experimental medications for Alzheimer's disease. There are also studies that we're doing where we just monitor people once a year and do some different tests, and you help us learn about these diseases. And this has a huge impact. So I encourage you to do those things. So if there are, please send your questions through the Facebook box, and I welcome anything to do with, this topic or in general with dementia.
And with that, I'll ask some questions from the public that have been asking as we've been talking here. So thank you so much. I'm Tim Iden with the City of Peoria. I'm going to be your moderator for today. And if you have questions, feel free. This is your time to post them on Facebook. We can also reach out afterwards if you're watching this not live. But if you're watching live, feel free to ask some questions. So I do have some questions from the public. The first one is about technology. There's a whole host of new technology that can monitor your sleep. Fitbits, Apple Watches, that sort of thing. Do those work? Are those recommended?
So those are, many of those are quite good actually at identifying our rest activity routine. And so essentially for those who don't have these type of wearable devices, they can tell when we're sleeping and they can tell when we're moving. And so that does give you a good general idea of how you're doing in that regard. And so I think that's a good starting point. I always say with that and other technologies, it's just important not to worry too much about the details and to fixate on it and to wake up in the middle of the night and look at your, how are you doing at 3 in the morning? Because that's counterproductive. And I have heard that can cause a lot of problems in that regard. So for the most part, I think those are good and fairly accurate.
Very good. Another question about a caregiver who deals with a loved one with dementia. Specifically, as a caregiver dealing with a loved one with dementia, how do I, or do you have some tips on how to regulate their sleep schedule? Or, you talked a little bit about napping during the day, that sort of thing.
Sure. So starting point is write down what time do they wake up, what time are they napping, and what time do they go to bed. And then you can actually have a sleep diary, which is typically done for 14 days. You can actually just look online and print out a sleep diary, and it is very helpful for you to do that and to see what is the person doing at night, how often are they waking up. Now that is can be difficult to do, but also you probably are waking up with them, so you can just jot that down. And you could also bring that to your doctor. Now, the fixed wake-up time is crucial. So I would say try to get that to be the optimal time for the person. And then the daytime napping, keep that down to a minimum to 45 minutes at the most. Again, this can be very difficult. Everyone's doing the best they can. If your person just, feels compelled to sleep and take naps, then do your best to limit it. And part of that has to do with bringing in activities, and that's a big challenge right now. So firstly, doing the inventory, figuring out where you're at and where your person's at, and then taking one step at a time in that regard.
Thank you. And like I said, please keep the questions coming. We appreciate the public input. So a question about sleep and health. Health is on everybody's minds right now, obviously with COVID. Can healthier sleep help decrease the chance of illness?
Absolutely. All of these body systems are tied together. So if I flip it and say, if you're sleep deprived routinely, that can lessen your immune system and put you at risk of becoming sick. And so protecting the nighttime sleep is crucial. So taking steps to figure out how to do that for the immune system and other systems is important.
Gotcha, thank you. What about for a caregiver who is not caring for someone at home? So if I have a loved one that I care for, but maybe they're still away from me, how do I help monitor their sleep schedule if I'm not there?
That's a great question because it can be difficult. If you know that your person might be getting woken up earlier than is best for them, so maybe they are getting woken up at 7 a.m. when really you know they do better if they can sleep till 8 a.m. because you've gone to visit them and you see that, oh, they're much more engaged and alert when they can sleep that extra hour. I would talk with the staff, talk with the nurse, talk with the nurse manager of where that person's staying. And I think, in my experience, most facilities are willing to make that shift. And then in terms of napping, so really try to get a sense of what are they doing when they're, with their days. And if you find that they're dozing a lot or not being stimulated, how can more activities be brought into their day? Is there, say, physical therapy offered where they live? And although that's usually temporary, that can initiate more movement, and that person may then get more accustomed to doing more activity during the day, which can then transition into other types of physical activities where they're living.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about reading and sleep? I know two things. One, a lot of people associate reading and falling asleep, and you also mentioned not to or to associate bed with sleep.
Yeah.
And then also, I know a lot of people have switched from reading traditional books to ebooks, and we talked about not having that screen time before bed. Is there a recommendation for reading and sleep? Is that something there's a correlation there?
So if you're trying to go get the A+ in sleeping, then you're not going to read in bed at all. Now, I always make it relative to the individual. So say you're starting out from a place where you're watching TV in bed. Reading's much better than that. So read, but read something that's even, is not going to get you too excited, is not too distressing. And so I would say for a short amount of time, reading is okay. And on the tablet, as long as there's none of that blue light being emitted, then similarly it should be okay. But again, if you can just read in your living room and then go to bed, that would be better.
Very good. Doctor, those are all the questions that we have from the public. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Just thank you for having me here. Thank you to Benevilla. And early diagnosis is crucial in this regard. So reach out to our clinic or other memory specialists if you have any concerns. And thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching Caregiver Connect. Or part one of Caregiver Connect. We have more presentations over the next 2 hours. If you didn't get your question answered right now, if you're watching this at a later date, feel free to post your question right here in Facebook, and we will definitely have someone get back to you. We will be back in about 5 to 10 minutes with another presenter. And again, thank you for watching, and thank you for coming.
Caregivers are young and old, rich and poor, their husbands, wives, daughters, sons, and neighbors. They don't apply for the job, and they don't earn retirement or have vacation days. Yes, caregivers are special, and they need our help.
I became aware of Benevilla when I was trying to locate somewhere where I could help with care for my dad at home, and I talked to the Peoria location, who was very wonderful and informative, took plenty of time and told me about the different facilities they have for dementia. And we went and visited the Sun City, but it was a higher level of function than what my dad was at. And so we went over to Mary's Memory Place and have never regretted it. They've just been so caring and thoughtful and professional and polite, and I just can't, they have added so much to his life as far as just having that cognitive stimulation and that interaction, and they've added so much to our lives too, to help give us that opportunity for Dad, but also an opportunity for us to have a break in his caretaking.
For every person enrolled in a Benevilla program, 2 people get their lives back, the individual and the caregiver.
I don't know if I would be able to keep him at home as long as we have without the staff of Benevilla and supporting us in our goal to keep him home and to keep him walking and to keep him engaged and active. Before Benevilla, when I was living in Michigan with him and we didn't have that, he would get up, eat, and sleep. Eat lunch and sleep. Eat dinner and sleep. He was sleeping probably 20 hours out of the day. And so his life has made significant improvements since the staff of Benevilla have been involved. Again, not only for my dad, but for our lives too. I cannot tell you how much it's appreciated, because without it, I would not be able to have my dad here at home and be able to maintain that. So, and it's not just me, my dad, if he were able, he would say thank you.
Without your support, Benevilla wouldn't be here today to serve so many in our community. You are here. You are Benevilla. And you are enriching lives. Many of us take for granted the ability to get into our vehicles and drive ourselves to the grocery store or to a medical appointment, the ability to easily change a light bulb or an air filter, or even the ability to leave our home for a lunch date with a friend. Many members of our community are no longer able to leave their homes, and they rely on the help of others to assist with these daily tasks.
What I do for Benevilla with several of the clients, I do grocery shopping, I do friendly visits, I pick up their mail. Some of the mailboxes are a little bit further than they can go, so I pick up their mail, take it to them. I've picked up medication. I've run some to the doctor, some to the bank, just a little bit of everything.
Nearly 90% of older adults prefer to remain in their homes as they age. However, maintaining independence can be challenging for many of our neighbors.
My son-in-law put me in touch with Benevilla because every summer he goes to Alaska for approximately 3 to 4 months, and he was worried about how I would get along without someone to kind of watch over me. The first time that I met Diane, she told me a lot about herself, and I talked to her too about me and just about anything and everything. And we hit it off okay, and it's been that way ever since.
We're each other's angels. She kept saying, "You're my angel, you're my angel." I said, "No, you're my angel." So we're each other's angels. Right?
Hi, I'm Tim Iden. Welcome back to Caregiver Connect, brought to you by Peoria Support and Benevilla, which is also sponsored by Western as well. I'd like to introduce our next guest. Our next guest is Brenda Holt. She is the Associate State Director of Community Outreach and Advocacy for AARP Arizona. She's responsible for executing various program initiatives, activities, and events for AARP on a local, state, and national level. She holds a master's degree in organization management from the University of Phoenix. Over the last 25 years, she has worked for such organizations as PetSmart Corporate Charities, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Arizona, the Department of Justice's Weed and Seed Program, American Express Mass Mutual Insurance, Loctite Corporation. Most recently, she was awarded the Community Hero Award from the AZ Commission of African American Affairs. In 2018, she was awarded the BBOD, Black Board Off Directors, Dr. Charles R. Campbell Outstanding Alumna Award. That was a mouthful. And in 2017, the Arizona Celebration of Women Achieving My Purpose Award. She serves on the board of directors for the Foundation of Senior Living, the Arizona Commission for African American Affairs, and the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging, the Attorney General's African American Advisory Council, and its Veterans Subcommittee. In 2020, she joined the board of Arizona Foundation for Women. Brenda is a 13-year resident of Avondale and formerly the state of Michigan. Brenda is married and has 2 adult daughters, an avid reader, and a lover of animals. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brenda, and let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Well, good morning. Thank you.
Of course.
On behalf of the Arizona State Office of AARP, we are glad to be here with you today to share some tips and some tools to help you through your navigating journey of caregiving. First Lady Rosalind Carter said 4 things. She said, you are either a caregiver, you are a caregiver, you will be a caregiver, or you will need a caregiver. Caregiving can be challenging and rewarding, but it is also a much needed process to aid you and your loved ones to take care of yourself. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, older adults and individuals with chronic health conditions are at a higher risk of serious illness from the coronavirus. Many of these vulnerable individuals also live in communities where disease spread quickly, such as in our nursing homes and our assisted care living facilities. With already more than 40 million family caregivers helping loved ones with care in the United States, we expect the virus to increase the number of family caregivers who are providing short-term, long-term care for their older loved ones. ARP wants to offer some tips and some guidance to family caregivers, specifically to help them tackle how to create a plan for those that they're caring for, and supporting those that are new to the caregiving process due to the virus impacting more of the older population. So there are 5 tips that we recommend to help you navigate through this process. The first step will be to build your team. The second step would be to take inventory. The third step would be gather your medical documents and your needs. Your third step would be to plan to stay connected. And the last step is regarding personal safety and self-care. So pull together your team. Putting together a team is paramount. It is very important that you put together a team that is going to help you on all fronts, whether it is cooking a meal, whether it is running errands, whether it's potential doctor appointments, making phone calls, doing some banking, whatever that is, you need to assemble a team. So first of all, we recommend that you put together a list of individuals in your family or your friends' network and the services that your community can provide to help you with some of these key tasks. And while there may be one primary family caregiver, you need to identify others that can step in just in case you are not able to. So you need someone that's going to help you with the shopping, someone's going to help you with the errands. And then you need to find the best person that you feel that is going to just help you run your house cared for. And you can also find out the various services, local resources, such as there's, Meals on Wheels programs that can help deliver meals. We're also into the new age of delivering food and curbside pickup and, the Grub Hubs. So utilize these features along with putting your team together to help you through this. So number 2 is take an inventory of your essential items. And we would recommend this not just for the caregiving process, just even for your own general needs. As far as inventory of items that you cannot do without, should something happen, even within this pandemic, that you can't get out. So you need to determine how much food you're going to need. You need to determine how much medication. You're going to need to determine the basic supplies, first aid kits, dog food, cat food, just things that you probably haven't thought about. Just take an inventory. And we recommend that you have at least a 2-week supply of water, of food, of cleaning supplies, medical materials. I even suggest having some extra cash on hand for those emergencies that you probably haven't thought about. The third step would be to get medications in order. Ask for extra. A lot of times your physician can write you a 90-day script, and we suggest that during these times you may want to consider doing that. As a starting point, make sure that you have a list of medications, medical contacts, important information regarding maybe certain allergies that you may have. We recommend an extra 30-day supply, as I said, but I even would say go further, maybe even get you a 90-day supply. We would also recommend that you put all of your information maybe in a central located area. Maybe create a binder is what we recommend. A binder will list all of the medications they're taking, the doctor's contacts, all of the people that are on your team. That information can be listed in there. If they have special needs regarding their dieting or their personal care, you can create a binder and place all of that information inside of that binder. And we think that that will help you to make sure that you have this step covered. Step number 4, create a plan to stay connected. So we know that during this time it can be a challenge to stay connected, to those loved ones. And we also recognize that our older population tends to have issue with isolation right now. It's a huge issue as we begin to follow the social distancing guidance from the CDC. So set up some communication using a variety of technology if you're able to do that. So if your loved one is in a long-term care facility or nursing home, if possible, check with the faculty or facility and your loved ones to make sure that they are trying to make some reasonable accommodations using various technologies so that you can connect. Maybe provide your loved one with an iPhone or even an iPad if you can do that. If the center supports the various technologies as far as like Google or Alexa, we recommend that as well. And also you can stay connected by maybe sending a card to that loved one, or you can write a letter, or send them puzzles, or you can create like a FaceTime where the two of you get together and you just have a special time that maybe you reminisce about old times or kind of what some of the things that are going on right now, to put their mind at ease so that they will not feel that they are really in that isolation phase, because they know that they are being able to be connected with you. And the last step we recommend is to maintain personal safety and self-care. So in order to be safe and stay healthy, we recommend that you limit contact with visitors, stay in as much as you can, and continue to follow the guidelines provided by the CDC, such as washing your hands, wearing a face mask. While most of us are very focused on the person that we are caring for, it is also essential to care for yourself. And I can speak to that on a personal level. I was a caregiver for a gradual period of 30 years, being an only child. And I understood that taking care of my parents was a very, very, very important job. So juggling school, juggling work, taking care of kids, and also managing another household. So one of the things I did recognize early on was that I needed to also take care of myself, because if I could not take care of myself, then of course, obviously, I couldn't take care of my loved ones. So while before the pandemic happened, I had made it a habit, and I've been doing this for years, I would get a monthly massage. And that would just help me oh so much to get through that caregiving process. And also some nights, I would like to say that having a glass of wine didn't hurt at all either. That also helped me to maintain my sanity and to calm my nerves and to get ready for the next day as I took on my caregiver period. Finally, I'd like to provide you with some resources that AARP has come up with. And you can see that they're listed here. So you can always go to aarp.org/CRF or call 211, which is the United Way's support line. You can visit AARP's Caregiver During the Coronavirus resources at aarp.org/caregiving. Also check out Caregiving and COVID-19, where you'll find some related tip sheets that can be found at aarp.org/employer caregiving. And finally, we have an online Prepare to Care guide that is free, and it is available to anyone who would like to get this guide. You can reach that at aarp.org/prepare to care. Thank you for your time. We hope that we have provided some helpful tips to help you navigate through your caregiver journey. And we know that sooner or later this pandemic will pass and we will get back to some semblance of some normalcy, but we also know that the caregiver journey never ends. So we want to thank all of you who are in the trenches of caregiving. It is a very challenging and can be a very challenging time in your life, but be patient with yourself, be patient with your loved ones. Make sure you reach out and put that team together. Make sure you have your medical needs taken care of. Make sure you've done your inventory piece. Make sure you reach out for the resources that we've provided and others. You can also connect with Benevilla. We are a partner with Benevilla, and it's been a great partnership with them, and they too are just as invested in this caregiving initiative and journey as we are. Thank you.
That's great information. Thank you so much. And thank you for your experience as well. I think a lot of people right now have become caregivers that may never have been caregivers before or never thought of themselves that way. They may have, healthy parents that are older, but are now, just not leaving the house as much. So COVID-19 really has, I think, changed the dynamic of what a caregiver is.
It is.
So that was great information.
Okay.
I have some questions from the public. So. First of all, please, if you have questions, post them here on Facebook. We're monitoring those questions and we can ask them live. Also, if you're watching this and it's recorded, feel free to put your questions in anyway, and we will definitely get back to you. So let's get to a couple of questions from the public, and this is a really, really important one because it's about the delicate balance of how do I navigate the slippery slope of doing what I can for my loved ones without feeling guilty. Yeah,
okay.
It really is a tough one because there's only so much time in people's days, and balancing my life with that of the person I'm giving care for.
Okay, well, let's be clear. It is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
It is, and trying to balance it all can be challenging. I would recommend that you try best you can to develop a schedule. So if you know that mom has that doctor appointment tomorrow at 10, you need to make sure that that's on all of your devices so that you won't miss that appointment. Also, you look at needs, I guess, versus wants per se, and I'm going to say that you take care of the needs. And if there's some things that can wait, that's where your team comes in. And that's where you begin to ask others. And I think one of the mistakes I feel that caregivers do make is they think they can do it all, and you cannot. And you will burn yourself out rather quickly if you think you can do it, but you just can't. So I would say is to try to develop a plan through utilizing the team that we talked about, and do not feel guilty about taking time for yourself. If you want to take that extra 20-minute bubble bath, make sure you carve out some time to do that. If you want to go and go to the park and read a book, do not feel guilty. Just make sure that the loved one, of course, is covered so that you can do that. Now, if they're in a facility, you pretty much already know that they are, there and they're taken care of. Maybe you were going 5 days a week. Maybe you might want to cater that the next week and maybe do 3 days a week to give yourself some time off. So I would say take care of them, take care of you, and don't feel guilty about taking time for yourself.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about taking care of you. I think that's so important because, for an empathetic person, we often put the needs of others before the needs of ourselves, and it's important that you take care of yourself. Otherwise, you burn out.
You do.
That's fantastic advice. So a little bit more talking about COVID. Again, thank you all for your questions. How do I ensure my loved one is social distancing, wearing a mask, without also, maybe panicking them and causing anxiety? Where there's another balance there. How can I ensure that they're doing the right things?
Well, this is all new to us, and the mask feature is, new to everyone, not just, the loved ones that you're caring for. And I think that if you lead by example, so I think if you're caring for someone in the home and you have to take them out, I think you might need to do a little practicing or have that conversation, with them before you take them out to make them understand the importance of the need to wear the mask and why, and it's to protect everyone. And I think, most people will kind of agree to that they're trying to protect, everyone. But I would say lead by example. That would be the first thing. I would even say maybe get a few whimsical masks, that maybe has some expressions on it, and maybe you want to kind of have that discussion and maybe talk about it. Find out what their favorite color is. Maybe go get them something that's of their favorite color. Maybe their outfits match. I have a tendency to wear my mask match my outfit, so I've been doing that. And I think for those that are, in the long-term care facilities that, may not fully understand, I again just think there needs to be some open communication about it and some discussion as to why we're doing this.
That's great. That's all fantastic advice, especially the mask. I find I don't like to wear the surgical ones because I want to, kind of reflect my personality a little bit.
And I even think that, sometimes I'm out even and they can be uncomfortable. And there are times that even, every now and then I'll just, kind of take them to air them, just to get a little extra air in. Even suggest that to them. Well, you got to wear it. It may be uncomfortable, but here's what we're going to do. Every 10 minutes, maybe we're going to pull out and get a little air in. Or
that balancing act.
Absolutely.
Good. Question, we talked a little bit about it, but technology. My loved one is not tech savvy. What are some other ways that I can stay connected besides, technology?
Well, if you want to visit as often as possible, the telephone. Just pick up the phone. And I think even those of us who are really heavily involved in technology, we tend to rely on those devices. Sometimes it's just good to pick up the telephone and call that person. And if you are in a situation to where you can't physically visit, make those arrangements where you can visit from outside, just so they can maybe just see you. Again, we talked about maybe sending a card, that would just kind of help to brighten their day. Maybe have other people call them on the phone, maybe the grandkids or someone else, a pastor, or someone call to give them, words of encouragement. Send a poem. Just something to let them know. Send a picture, an old photo to let them, let's talk about some memories, that we've maybe made over the years to, to kind of bring them back into the fact that they don't have to feel so isolated.
Yeah, and that's so important to have those connections still. And there are plenty of ways that the phone is such a great example of it, where we, you mentioned FaceTime and things like that, and a good old-fashioned phone call is really
that helps.
Yeah. And then I know also. I know a lot of families are meeting in the driveway with social distancing, so mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and even the grandkids are playing out in the yard, but just to see them.
Just to see them.
Yeah.
Well, there's a young lady the other day that she was so in love with her grandmother, and she was about to get married. And she did not want her grandmother to miss out on the wedding, and her grandmother was in a facility. They had the wedding at the facility. I mean, how special was that? Right. So to me, those are things that you can, when their birthdays come about, try to see if you can arrange maybe to have something that's going to encompass the social distancing piece, but to also honor them and to celebrate their special days.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, that kind of brings us a little bit to our next question. how do I continue to create memories during this challenging times? I want to maximize my time with a loved one, but it has become very hard.
Okay. Take some photos. And we talked about that. Take some photographs. Go back and maybe find some old photographs from your childhood or theirs. Maybe create a collage. One of the things I've done with some of our ARP volunteers, we have monthly meetings. And one of the exercises that I thought to do one meeting was, I said, bring me an old photograph, bring me a new photograph. What would that new photograph tell that old photograph? And we were amazed. It took over the entire meeting that people were able to go back in their lives and talk about what they would have told their younger selves. And to see some of those photographs of how they looked then and how they look now, a lot of them hadn't changed. A lot of them were more beautiful even. And they were so glad that we had that. They said, we'd never thought to do something like that. So to me, something that's going to create, anything you can think of that creates some memories. To me, find maybe an old book that they read to you as a child and bring that up again. Get some family members. Everybody get together and put some photographs together and maybe send them a nice collage to put in their room, either if they're in a facility or even at home with you. You can do that, and I just kind of think that will help create memories for them as well as for you.
Yeah, and I think going back over old memories is so important. And like you said, creating new memories. I still will never forget a rainy day when my grandfather and I talked about his career in the war. And that was actually the first time I had ever heard about it. I knew he had fought. I knew he had served, but I didn't know the extent of it. And we spent an afternoon just discussing that, and thank goodness for that rainy day. So sharing those old memories, yeah, especially with grandkids too.
That's it. And there's even something I went online one time and pulled the day you were born. You go back and pull that. The day you were, and it tells you everything that happened in history the day that you were born. That's something you could give to them to create a memory, I think, as well. So
yeah, and can you talk just a little bit about that quality time? Because I know, spending time with a loved one sometimes, someone that you care becomes about that caregiving. How do you manage that quality time?
The quality time. So it goes, quality versus quantity per se. So. I just think with the quality piece is that you want to make sure that when you connect with them, that they are the focus and that they know that they are the focus of the conversation, they are the focus of your feelings. And, you were talking about being, empathetic. People can tell. People know when it's genuine, when you're there connecting, and in a sense when you're not. So I would say, pick out some of the things that you know that they like to talk about. Okay, and then maybe even talk about some new things. Have you heard about this? And what do you think about this? I think to try to engage them as much as possible and just let them really know that you are there for them.
Yeah, and put your phone away too.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
that is it. Yes.
I think that's all age groups. We need to remember
concentrate on them.
We're out at dinner, and I look around, and it's 50 family members. Everybody has their phone out. So.
And what do we do before that? What did we do before we had all these devices? What did we do? We talked to each other, didn't we? Okay.
Yeah.
Getting back to simple conversation.
Thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything else that you want to add? Do you have any other tips? Those are all the questions we have from the public. And again, please feel free to ask those questions right here on Facebook, and we will get back to you. Is there anything else you got?
I just want to say thank you for allowing ARP Arizona to come and talk to you today, to deliver some tips and some tools. And hopefully we provided some resources and good information for you. You can always contact us at aarp.org/Arizona, and you will find we have events that are coming up that are also tied to the Caregiver Initiative, and that's another one of our platforms that ARP is very passionate about is caregiving, because there were years prior we did not have this. We did not know about caregiving. Like you were saying, we didn't know. It was just something that we did, okay? And we took care of those family members. And so now that we have identified that, caregiving is very important, we are so glad now that we're able to offer resources to those that are in the throes of the journey. And we want to let you know you're not alone, that you can reach out to others, and also just make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
And I think that's really what today is about, is resources and support. And I love that you said you don't have to do it alone, because you don't. The City of Peoria has an entire department called Peoria Support, and we offer support from everywhere from senior citizens to veterans to just every need that you can imagine. And you know, through today we have Benevilla, we have AARP, but there's so many ways to reach out and find support. We will be putting all of this information on the Facebook post. We'll have some of the information on our website as well. You can also visit Benevilla, and you can also visit directly AARP. There are so many places for you to reach out for support, but please make sure that you do reach out. Thank you again for your time. We are going to be right back after a short break with another speaker. And again, thank you for watching.
Many of us take for granted the ability to get into our vehicles and drive ourselves to the grocery store or to a medical appointment, the ability to easily change a light bulb or an air filter, or even the ability to leave our home for a lunch date with a friend. Many members of our community are no longer able to leave their homes, and they rely on the help of others to assist with these daily tasks.
What I do for Benevilla with several of the clients, I do grocery shopping, I do friendly visits, I pick up their mail. Some of the mailboxes are a little bit further than they can go, so I pick up their mail, take it to them. I've picked up medication. I've run some to the doctor, some to the bank, just a little bit of everything.
Nearly 90% of older adults prefer to remain in their homes as they age. However, maintaining independence can be challenging for many of our neighbors.
My son-in-law put me in touch with Benevilla because every summer he goes to Alaska for approximately 3 to 4 months, and he was worried about how I would get along without someone to kind of watch over me. The first time that I met Diane, she told me a lot about herself, and I talked to her too about me and just about anything and everything. And we hit it off okay, and it's been that way ever since.
We're each other's angels. She kept saying, "You're my angel, you're my angel." I said, "No, you're my angel." So we're each other's angels. Right?
Right.
Caregivers are young and old, rich and poor, their husbands, wives, daughters, sons, and neighbors. They don't apply for the job, and they don't earn retirement or have vacation days. Yes, caregivers are special, and they need our help.
I became aware of Benevilla when I was trying to locate somewhere where I could help with care for my dad at home. And I talked to the Peoria location, who was very wonderful and informative, took plenty of time and told me about the different facilities they have for dementia. And we went and visited the Sun City, but it was a higher level of function than what my dad was at. And so we went over to Mary's Memory Place and have never regretted it. They've just been so caring and thoughtful and professional and polite, and I just can't, they have added so much to his life as far as just having that cognitive stimulation and that interaction, and they've added so much to our lives too, to help give us that opportunity for Dad, but also an opportunity for us to have a break in his caretaking.
For every person enrolled in a Benevilla program, 2 people get their lives back, the individual and the caregiver.
I don't know if I would be able to keep him at home as long as we have without the staff of Benevilla and supporting us in our goal to keep him home and to keep him walking and to keep him engaged and active. Before Benevilla, when I was living in Michigan with him and we didn't have that, he would get up, eat, and sleep. Eat lunch and sleep. Eat dinner and sleep. He was sleeping probably 20 hours out of the day. And so his life has made significant improvements since the staff of Benevilla have been involved. Again, not only for my dad, but for our lives too. I cannot tell you how much it's appreciated, because without it, I would not be able to have my dad here at home and be able to maintain that. So, and it's not just me. My dad, if he were able, he would say thank you.
Without your support, Benevilla wouldn't be here today to serve so many in our community. You are here. You are Benevilla. And you are enriching lives.
And we're back. This is Tim with the City of Peoria, here with Benevilla Connect, brought to you by Peoria Support. Thank you for joining us. We really are so excited. This is a live Q&A, so if you have questions, post them right here on Facebook and we will answer them live. And if you're watching this recorded and not live, feel free to post those questions anyway, and we will get back to you. Our next presenter is Connie Danks. Connie Danks received her bachelor's in social science from Bethany College in 1983 and her master's in counseling and psychology in 1994 from National University. She has worked in the helping profession for over 30 years. She has worked many different populations, including eating disorders, addictions, trauma, juvenile delinquents, abused children, and severe mental illness. Connie came to work for Benevilla in 2012 as a life enrichment partner and soon moved up to the director of life enrichment at Mary's Place. She worked at Mary's Place for nearly 5 years and found that she loved working with the elderly. She states, "It is such a privilege to work with people in our society that served our country through the military, labor force, and raising families. Most of them did it right and now need help." Connie has always taken pride in learning from other people she helps. Empathy, understanding, and asking the next question have been the best way to learn about any disease process. Later, she moved into the director of home services for 6 months and then took 9 months sabbatical traveling around the country after the loss of her partner. When she came back, she was offered the position of support group facilitator and program entertainer. Connie has learned many of the old favorite songs that touch the population that she plays for. Since that time, she has developed Benevilla's Life Coach program, increased Benevilla's free support groups. Connie believes that life coaching is the perfect fit for caregivers since it focuses on finding solutions and reaching goals that caregivers sets for themselves. Connie, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate you taking questions from the public.
You're welcome. I was actually given a whole set of questions that came through before this event happened. So I pre-answered some of them, so I'm going to go with those questions first, and then if there's any live questions, I'd be happy to answer those. What do I say when my husband asks about someone who has passed? He thinks they are still here. The problem with that oftentimes is that when, say, his mom died, and she's been gone for 10 years, but he really doesn't remember. And usually this is in the later stages. Bringing that up and telling them your mom died 10 years ago is like re-traumatizing them. It's like a brand new loss for them. So it actually doesn't make any sense to tell them the truth. And I know that lots of people have an issue because they've been married for many, many years, and their marriage was based off of integrity and telling the truth. But at this particular point in their life, it's much more compassionate to learn what we call therapeutic fibbing. Many people feel guilty about it, but the reality is that it's sometimes better to be effective than it is to be right. So being compassionate and understanding that is a new trauma for them doesn't give them the truth, but it does help them deal with the emotions behind it. So some of the ways that you can answer those questions are simply by saying something like, well, she's on vacation and she doesn't have access to a phone. That can be really helpful. They can go, oh, well, when is she going to be back? You can say she's going to be back in a couple of weeks. The thing is that because of the memory loss, they're not going to remember that they had that conversation with you. So when a week goes by and they've completely forgotten it, which oftentimes happens within 10 minutes, so they might ask the same question again 10 minutes later. You can answer it a different way if you want, but telling them the truth at that particular point in time doesn't help. The other way to deal with it, if they're fairly new into this memory process, is to help them recognize what they may be feeling. Oh, it sounds like you miss your mom. What did you like about your mom? So that connects with them. It's not lying, it's avoiding, but it's not lying. The other thing you can do is distract and use a different way of dealing with it. So you can say things like, hey, you want to go get an ice cream? I know that's completely off topic, but oftentimes it works really well. Another question is, how do I motivate my husband to walk or use weights? He's resistant and stubborn. So it sort of depends on what's going on, but oftentimes what you have to do is you have to step into their shoes and realize that all of the capacities that they had before that are slowly disappearing and their ability to do things has diminished. And so again, it's about stepping into their shoes and being empathetic and finding a different way to get them motivated. Music can often be a fantastic motivator. One of the things that I got to do for Benevilla, and I can't do it now because of COVID, was I sang at all the centers, and I learned all those old songs. And it was amazing to see people who would get up and dance and do things that they had never done before. Their inhibition decreases as the disease progresses. And so some things that they wouldn't do before, they will do now. Another way to motivate them is to get involved yourself. So you're not asking them to do something that you're not doing. Put on some music and you've got some weights out and you're going, hey, look, let's do weights. And you're doing it with them, so it doesn't feel quite so foreign. Sometimes that doesn't work either. And the truth is that sometimes as a spouse or a child who is working with the person who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia isn't going to be motivated by you because they actually may recognize you and now you're picking on them or you're nagging them. And so sometimes it becomes important to get a third party to come in. So that's where a caregiver that you're paying for that's outside can come in and very possibly motivate them much better than you can, which sometimes doesn't feel good. But we do have to get to the place as caregivers where we're willing to take our own thoughts and feelings and kind of put them aside for the greater good. And oftentimes that's where a life coach can come in very handy, and or a support group, because there's so many people that are going through the same thing you are. And you can get suggestions from those folks and learn from those folks and also have a place to vent safely and freely with people who understand. Another question I got was, when my husband wants to take issue with something, how do I keep from arguing the back and forth with him? He's got dementia. The answer to that one is pretty clear. When somebody has a memory loss like that, they are going to argue about things that they may not be right about. But again, part of that is going to be stepping into their shoes. If I say to you, I told you you had an appointment 10 minutes ago. Why are you asking me that you have when is your next doctor's appointment? That frustration, those feelings that come up, those facial expressions that you make, your volume, the tone, everything else, can trigger them into more argument. So the best way to handle that oftentimes is to answer the same question, no matter how many times they ask it, take a deep breath and answer it like they've never heard it before. One of the things I used to do as the program director for Mary's Place was I would actually play a game. So a fella'd come in and he'd say, when's my wife coming? And I'd say, you know, she's coming at 2 o'clock. And he'd say, okay, and he'd walk out. 5 minutes later, when's my wife coming? Where's she at? And I'd say, you know, I think she said she was going to be here at 2 o'clock. And so I'd play this game of trying to answer the question a little bit different each time, but as though the question were brand new. And I would monitor my own feelings and thoughts about it and just take a deep breath and answer that question again like it was a brand new question. You're never going to win an argument with someone who's got advanced dementia. So again, the best way to do that is to just answer them as though you'd never heard it before. Avoid any arguments because you're not going to win. You can also use distraction again and say, hey, where's the dog? I thought you were going to feed the dog this morning. Is the dog around? So those kinds of things. Another question I got was, I do visiting with people who need caregiving, and so want to word this question in a way that won't single anyone out. I realize that it's normal for caregivers to have frustrations and feelings that sometimes get so intense that words are said that are very hurtful toward the person they're caring for. How can a caregiver vent these feelings without taking it out on their loved ones? I have to tell you, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to get involved in a caregiver support group or life coaching. If you don't feel comfortable in groups, you can give us a call at Benevilla and we can set you up with that. Otherwise, those support groups are lifesavers. And the reason they're lifesavers is because it is a safe place for you to vent what's going on with you. And pretty much my experience through those support groups has been that people do say some really incredible things and they talk about their feelings. 90% of the time they're going to find out that they're not alone, that everybody in the room is feeling the same thing. And oftentimes when somebody asks a question like, what do I do when I feel so much guilt? And people are answering and say, hey, you got to put guilt aside because it's not helpful. It's going to end you up in some kind of downward cycle. And everybody in the group's going, yes. I've also heard over and over again that those caregiver groups have been lifesavers for them because it is a safe place to vent. Oftentimes our family don't understand. They want to give us advice and they want to give us correction about the way we're handling things, but they're not in the mix. You need people that are in the mix with you, that understand what you're going through. The next question was, what can be done to resolve things when they do blow up and hurtful things are said? I have to tell you, if the person is at the beginning of the process, I'm sorry can go a really long way. I didn't handle that really well, and I just want to tell you that I'm sorry for the fact that I lost my temper with you. Now, that can also backfire depending on, again, where that person is in the process. If they're later in the process, they may look at you and go, what happened? Why are you apologizing? And if they're at that place, it's probably better to leave it alone because bringing it up again is going to just start a new argument, and you don't want to do that. One of the other suggestions I have for all of these questions is learn to do some deep breathing. So one of the things that we do at the beginning of our support groups is we ask folks to do some deep breathing with us, to put their feet on the floor, their hands in their lap, eyes closed and tummy out, and take a deep breath through their nose for 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, and blow all that stress out for 3 seconds. It's amazing how much that can change the situation because you're holding all that stress inside your body and you're not breathing deeply. Oftentimes when we're anxious or depressed or frustrated, we're holding our breath, which can give you a headache, it can cause fatigue, it can do all kinds of things that are not fun. So if you can get away even for a moment into the laundry room if you need to, and take a deep breath and just let it out. Do that 3 or 4 times while you're there and just recognize that this is a day. It's one day in a very long journey. And I don't know how long that journey is for you. So sometimes it's not real long and sometimes it's really long. But deep breathing can certainly help in the moment. So practice doing some of that. My loved one has been at home during COVID and is very apprehensive about going outside of the house now that they are used to being at home. What tips would you give to work with my loved one with dementia to get them to get more comfortable to get out of the house and or go to a program that they used to attend? Our day centers are amazing, and if you can get involved in one of the day centers, it's a time of respite for you, so you can take a time to take that bubble bath, to get that massage, to go shopping, to have a card game with friends, whatever it is. So this person is saying that they have COVID and they're not wanting to go back to the program. And what I would tell you is if they're involved in some kind of a day program, talk to the administrator of that program, the director, and manage to take some time to get them to that program to see that things are safe and that things are fun and that things are going on that feel normal. And it doesn't have to be that they have to stay there that day, but give them a chance to at least feel it. One of the things that Maya Angelou said is that people don't remember what we've said and people don't remember what we've done for them. What they remember is how we made them feel. And so that feeling is the thing that you want to go for in every situation. But I can tell you, as the Director of Life Enrichment for Mary's Place, that very often that was key. So people wouldn't want to go to the center, and I'd tell them, give them at least 10 times. Bring them anyway, because I want to create that feeling for them. And after a while, it was amazing because I'd have somebody come, after I did my 9-month sabbatical, I walked into the center and there was a gal there. She didn't remember my name. She didn't remember anything about me, but she looked at me and she said, "It's you." And she just got this big grin on her face. And I knew I had created that emotional connection. Not a memory about what I did, not a memory about what I said, not a memory about anything that had to do with my job. It had to do with the fact that I was able to connect with her on an emotional level. And that's the part that's really important. So if they're not wanting to go out, find ways to get them in situations with people that are safe where they can connect with them emotionally. I know it's difficult with the masks because oftentimes when we have Alzheimer's or any type of dementia, those folks are now only reading what it is that they're seeing visually and hearing auditorily in the tone, not the words themselves. They're not connecting with the words themselves anymore. And again, this is as the disease progresses. For those earlier stages when somebody's afraid and they have some concepts, it's still really important to get them into situations where they're going to have a good emotional experience. So you want to shoot for that. How can I get my friends and family to be a little bit more supportive of me as a caregiver since it has been harder than usual with COVID times? I need more support from them, even if it's just talking to them, and any advice would help. Well, the first thing I want to say is that most people who want to be supportive think that they have to fix it somehow. They think that they have to come up with some kind of answer, and they don't. So for you, when you're looking for that support, you need to be super specific about what it is you need. So it could be something as simple as, I just need an ear. I don't need advice. I don't need you to tell me what to do. There's so many books that I've read. I'm in a support group, but it's you I want to connect with. So if you could just listen for a while, that'd be great. And if they can do that, that's phenomenal. The other things you can do if your family members or friends live close by and they want to be supportive is to be specific about how they can support you. Can you take Jim for a walk in the morning for me? It would give me just time enough to take a shower and get ready for the day so that I'm not feeling rushed or worried about what he's doing or what he's getting into. Could you go grocery shopping for me? I have a couple of things that I need to get and I just don't have the time or the energy to do it. Could you pick up a prescription for me? There's so many little things. Can you come over and spend a couple of hours with Jim to allow me to go to something else? Those kinds of things can be super helpful for your family members. They don't know what to do very often and they feel pretty lost. So you can help them by giving them actual supportive things that will work for you. The other thing is Benevilla is working on it, but we're not quite there yet. There is a thing called a virtual dementia tour, which allows you to step into the shoes of the person with dementia. So if you've got family members or friends who want to be supportive, and if they are able to get into one of those tours, oftentimes what it can do is build empathy. Empathy is key to help somebody with dementia, to understand that this is not them trying to annoy you. They're not trying to tick you off. They're not trying to upset you. They are lost. They are lost and confused. And if you can step into their shoes and begin to understand, most of these folks were highly functioning people. They had jobs, they raised kids, they were in marriages, they've done all kinds of things. And a lot of times those folks are still in their life, but they've lost their sense of self. And for me, when I think about that, it's terrifying. It's terrifying to think, what would it be like to be that lost? And if we can step into their shoes and understand that, then we can begin to have a different way of dealing with them. And they'll feel that compassion. They'll notice it. They'll sense it. What activities do you think would be good for my loved one with dementia at home during these COVID times that would be simple enough for us to do, but would get their minds a little bit more active? If you look up the Alzheimer's organization the Area Agency on Aging, any of those particular platforms, oftentimes they have some fantastic suggestions, and you can type into the search bar activities that I can do at home with my loved one. Just for the sake of this particular venue, I'm going to go ahead and give you a few that I know work really well. Sorting cards, so taking like 5 or 6 different decks of cards that have different pictures on the backs, and piling them all together and mixing them all up, and then giving a bucket to them and saying, hey, you know what? I really need a full deck of cards to play with, and I don't even know if any of these cards actually are a full deck. And then laying each one of the pictures out and seeing if you can get them to sort the cards by the pictures. If they're a little bit more higher cognitively, they can do the actual card faces. But if they're not, then the pictures work really well. Sorting buttons. If you've got a big box of buttons and they're all mixed up, and having them sort buttons, that can work. Nuts and bolts if it's a guy. Sorting those out, screws, whatever. Just having them find the different piles. You know, you can use cups or whatever. Sometimes that works. Doing puzzles. There are Alzheimer's puzzles. I don't remember the name of the company off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But the smaller the puzzle, the better. Maybe 50 pieces is about it. Unless, again, they're at the beginning of the process. Sometimes puzzles can be frustrating, though. If you do have puzzles laying around that don't have all the pieces, or if you go get them at Goodwill or a thrift store, you can put down a piece of cardboard and say, hey, how about you glue some of these pieces onto this board and make a picture? And sometimes they can do that. It doesn't really matter whether or not the picture makes any sense to you. Cutting out coupons, cutting out pictures from magazines. You want to use safe scissors for them, again, depending on where they are in the process. But those are all things that can be pretty handy and can work really well. The internet is your friend, again, when it comes to finding activities, because there's a ton of them. One of the other things you can do that's really helpful is play music. If you want to do that, then try to find the music that really connected with them between the ages of 12 and 25. That seems to be the sweet spot for their music memory. And oftentimes playing music can kick into old memories or kick into those good feelings that they had. That age range is the age that they were actually listening to all of the lyrics. So it was their first kiss, the prom, their best friends, the slumber party they had, their wedding. It's all those really strong emotions from those younger years. And so they're going to remember those things. Remember, as they progress in the disease, their inhibitions are going to go away. So where somebody may not have danced when they were younger, you put on the music from your wedding and ask them if they'll dance with you. And surprisingly, oftentimes they will. It's pretty incredible. It can be a lot of fun. So music can be hugely motivating and help even when you are doing other tasks like sorting cards and things like that. However, you don't want to play it constantly over and over and over again all day long, because then it just becomes background noise. So you want to use it sparingly, but not, don't avoid it. Make sure you get that music on there. And most people do have it around because it was your favorite music. Just don't forget to play it. Due to COVID, my loved one has been unable to attend the program. I'm feeling overwhelmed. What can I do to prevent stress and caregiver burnout? Self-care is essential. Brenda already talked about self-care, taking a bubble bath, getting a massage. I know a lot of that requires somebody else to be there to help watch your loved one. If they're not very far in the process and you can still leave them at home, that's great. Take a walk. Do the things that bring you joy, whatever those things are. If you can't take them to a program, many of the home care organizations are bringing in people into your home. They've been tested for COVID, they're wearing their mask, they're watching their hands, they're doing things to make sure that your loved one is safe. If you need that, don't hesitate to do it, because if you burn out, if something happens to you, because stress can make you physically ill, if something happens to you, they lose their advocate. They lose the person that cares about them and wants to be there in their life. So it's incredibly important that you take care of yourself. There are lots of caregiver support groups that are online, that are doing Zoom meetings. If you can do that, please do. There's not a lot of live support groups at the moment, but those Zoom meetings also leave you at home, so you don't have to worry quite so much about what your loved one's up to. You can kind of keep an eye on them or an ear on them. Having a set of friends. Brenda was talking about having your support network. You need that. So whether it's somebody that you can call, and again, letting them know what exactly you need, being specific about it, and not having so much pride that you're supposed to be able to deal with this yourself, because this is a village effort. It really does take more than you to do this job. Life coaching, again, can be a really good one-on-one way of working through some of the issues that you've got and finding the support that you need if you feel like you're not getting what you need from other people. So that's an option. How can I deal with my family members' challenging behaviors without losing my patience? And again, I have to go back to empathy. Remember, it's not them, it's the disease. If they weren't fighting with you before, if they weren't arguing about everything all the time, then it really is the disease. So stepping into their shoes and beginning to understand that this isn't who they were. It may be who they are right now, but they're not enjoying it either. So finding the ability to have that patience is really important. And again, taking some really deep breaths, getting involved in support groups, and realizing that this isn't what they're intending, so it becomes you. You have to become an actor. You have to find the patience to be the person that they need at that moment. You can use distraction if they're really bothering you, again, by doing some of those simple tasks. If you can get them to do that, those are good things. I still believe that empathy is your best bet to step into their shoes. What programs are available to help pay for the costs of care? The Alzheimer's Association can oftentimes have caregiver hours, depending on your situation. That number is 1-800-272-3900. Again, 800-272-3900. If your loved one qualifies for Altex, which you probably won't know, you can get a hold of Benevilla. Benevilla has a few people that they can refer you to that can help you get information about whether or not you would qualify. If you do qualify, then their care can be paid for through Altex. If you have a loved one that was part of the military, the VA also has services that, programs that can help pay for care. So you're going to want to check out the VA and find out if your loved one served during wartime. Doesn't mean that they saw active duty, but they were served during wartime. Then they're eligible for benefits, even, again, if they didn't actually see any combat. So call your local VA and find out. That's a fantastic way. And that's about it. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know this is something that impacts so many people, and we've had people reach out and say thank you for your information online. So thank you for everyone that's watching. We do have a few more questions from the public. How can I get my family member to accept help?
Sometimes, depending on what's going on, you need to decide that they're not the one in charge. And again, it depends on where they are in the process. If they're right at the beginning of the process, one of the best things that you can do, if you're a spouse or a child, is say, you know what, I know you don't want help. This isn't for you. This is for me. I need help. I need a break. I need you to do this so that we have a good relationship and so that I can continue to be the best caregiver I can be. This is burning me out, and I need this. And when you do it that way, oftentimes, again, this is usually towards the beginning of the disease process, the person goes, oh, I have a way to help you by accepting somebody else coming into the home or by going to the day program. It's going to help me have you here with me longer. And so those two things can be really helpful.
What about other family members? How do I get my siblings to help with the caregiving?
Honestly, that's a tough one, and it's a tough one because there's so many family dynamics. But asking them specifically, is there anything that you can do to help me? Because this is really daunting. And they may minimize it. If you can get them to come out and stay with your mom or dad, it sounds like this sibling issue is usually for parents, to see what it's like instead of deciding, oh, well, you're not working, so you can do this and it's easy for you because you're not working. And it's like, oh no, this is a 24-hour job. There's no break. So asking them to come out and at least see what's going on. If they will not, I would not spend a tremendous amount of time beating your head up against a brick wall because that can be more frustrating than finding other help. So.
Yeah, and this question, like as you said, is probably more towards the beginning of the process, but what should I do when driving becomes an issue?
That's a great question. When driving becomes an issue, there is a program out of Tempe called, Driving to Independence. That's the name of the program. I don't have the phone number off the top of my head, but if you look it up on the internet, you can find it. Oftentimes, this works really well. And the reason it works is because the individual goes through this program where they do the written test and a driven test in a safe environment, so it's not on the road. And if they don't pass, then they will take their license at that moment and say, it's very obvious that you're not safe on the road. So it's not your loved one anymore. It's not your husband or wife or your kids that are taking your license away. It's an actual organization. And they send in a form to the DMV saying that they're not safe to drive. And so their license is gone. And so now you can say, I'm sorry, you can't drive. You don't have a license anymore. And you're not the one who did it. So it is really important to take a look at that. And I want to touch on one more issue when it comes to the driving issue. And that is that if your insurance company, if your loved one gets in an accident and they have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia, and the insurance company finds out that they have that diagnosis, then they can decline paying it because it becomes negligence on your part. So be aware that driving is an issue. They're not just putting themselves at risk, but everybody else on the road. So good question.
Yeah, and that's important to know. And I think the most important thing that you talked about just across the board is the resources. There are so many resources out there because of all those questions. There are so many places to reach out. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Like I said, I know this impacts so many people, and there are so many questions out there. And if you do have more questions, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to Benevilla. Feel free to reach out to Peoria Support. I think the goal of today, and maybe the takeaway from today, is that there are so many resources out there. Benevilla is a great community resource. Please reach out to them. Feel free to reach out to the City of Peoria Support. And again, you can ask your questions right here on Facebook, and we'll make sure they get to the right place. I want to thank everybody that was involved today. We have so many sponsors. Western State Bank, thank you so much for your sponsorship. I'd like to thank Benevilla. AARP was here today. And I'd also like to thank Peoria Support, who put this all together. We are still here if you have questions in the future. Thank you for giving us your time, and have a wonderful afternoon.